and my lovely child at home, and I'm one of the members of Young Eye for Justice Steering Committee. And today we're going to be talking about solutions, not suspensions, with amazing group of Make the Road organizers. We're also just going to be decompressing the Board of Education and budget votes that happened on Tuesday and were released yesterday. And then we're going to be ending kind of going through all of that just with introducing ourselves. And also Elle is going to be doing a mindful moment with us just to be able to take a pause, because we're definitely going to kind of run through a little bit of information first. For presenting, let me just double check. I am a co-host. So I just want to confirm of the Make the Road organizers. Are you okay if I present? Oh, you're going to be speaking and then go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. If you want to present, that's totally fine. Yep.
Oh, no, I was going to ask, I could put up the slides for you and click through as you like. That's great. So I just want to double check that. So pretty much what we're going to do is we're going to kind of run through what is solutions, not suspensions. How did it get brought up? What is this bill? Why has it been sitting in the state legislature for so long? And then we'll go into a few questions. There'll be a recorded part of those questions, and then we'll turn off the recording. And then, comfortability, if there's anything else you want to go over, questions you don't want on a live stream, that's then we'll do that. And then just give me a moment to be able to pull up the slides. Okay, so I'm going to start sharing my screen. Now you all see my screen. Just one moment. Everybody can see my screen, right? Yep. Oh, I don't have permission. Should I request permission? I'm not sure if you want me to or not. I just want to double check.
Yeah, I think that's a video that's there. So if you request it, I can give you access real quick.
Perfect. That's why I asked before we start. Request access. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay. Done. Okay, awesome. And so before you start the presentation, if you Make the Road organizers, if you don't mind just going around briefly and just introducing yourselves, and then you can get started with the information you have to share with us today.
I guess I can start us off. My name is Marcy, she, her, Aya, and I'm one of the youth organizers out here in Long Island for Make the Road New York's Youth Power Project. I'll kick it off to Nico.
Hey y'all, my name is Nico. I use they, them, and AJ pronouns. I'm also one of the youth organizers out here for Make the Road's Youth Power Project on Long Island. And I'll pass it to Kendra.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for having us. My name is Kendra. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a lead organizer with the Youth Power Project here on Long Island. Now I'll pass it back to Marcy.
Okay, so thank you all for allowing us the space to be here and have this conversation. First off, the Youth Power Project is a part of Make the Road, in which we are a group of Black, Latino, immigrant working class students who are engaging in making and bringing the social changes to our communities that we want to see. And Solutions Not Suspensions is a fight that we've been holding down for the past 6 years. The name was actually different. It was called the Safe and Supportive Schools Act. And then the name was changed about 1.5 years ago to be more consistent with what the bill is actually looking to do. So then it was changed to Solutions Not Suspensions. Why it's been such a long fight, there's been pushback in the past from like teachers, unions, and other folks who don't really understand the vision that the bill has and what it would mean for students. A lot of them might think that it would require big budgets because of certain things that the bill requires, but the bill is only suggesting ways of in which school districts can better support their students in reality. So Yeah, our students deserve solutions, not suspensions. We can go to the next slide. So again, this fight was started because we noticed that there was a huge problem in New York, where New York favors harsh and exclusionary punishments that unfairly target students of color and students with disabilities and the LGBTQ community students. Students with disabilities represent 18.7% of all students, but account for a 38.6% of all suspensions, often in violations to their due process rights. And we know that but based on research and conversations that we have had with our young people, that this is true and it's still happening. And they have to face all of these harsh punishments without being given the ability to really express themselves and given the chance to to fix a situation in which they might be in, right, or why they were suspended in the first place. So they're definitely unfairly targeted here in Long Island and in the state of New York. So why we are here, right? New York State school districts suspended a student at least once every minute in the 2016 to 2017 school year. Now, can we just imagine what that looks like? Suspending one student every minute of a school year, just here in the state of New York, right? That is wild to even imagine, right? That we're suspending that many students just in one school year. So we want to focus this research done, but we want to focus on Long Island based on the numbers and the inequities that our young people have to face when it comes to suspensions. So uh, uh, um, I'll just go off on the first three numbers of folks who are the highest impacted by suspensions. So in Nassau County, Black students represent a 7.2% of all suspensions. Latinos represent a 2.9 of suspensions, and Indigenous folks represent a 2.6%. While in Suffolk County, it's even crazier to imagine that the number of Black students being suspended is even over a one point increase in number of suspensions. So right here in Suffolk County, Black students are 8.7% more likely to be suspended than their white counterparts. And Indigenous folks represent a 5.9%, while Latinos represent a 3.2%. And I think it's great to point out the fact that, or the idea that Indigenous folks are suspended at a higher rate, because if we look out east, we have a lot of like tribes and Indigenous folks out there. So we can imagine why those numbers are a little bit higher out here in Suffolk than they are in Nassau. In Suffolk County, this is where we really want to point out the inequities and how Black students are targeted. Um, Suffolk, in Suffolk, Black students represent an 8% of enrollment, but 22% of all students who were suspended at least once. Black female students were 5.6 times more likely to be suspended than their white peers, while in Nassau County, Black students represented 12% of all enrollment, but 29% of all students who were suspended at least once. Black female students in Nassau were 6.2 times more likely to be suspended than their white peers. So we can see by this data the inequities that we have when it comes to suspensions and who has access to education all year round. Here is a video of one of our youth leaders with the Youth Power Project, who will share a little bit of her story and how suspensions have negatively impacted her as a young student here in Long Island.
Erin, we can't hear it.
When you hit share screen, make sure you hit the share sound.
Thank you. I'm not
Yeah.
the person who shares my screen. I appreciate that. Okay, part 2, everybody. I heard a little bit of a teaser. That's all that means.
During my week-long suspension, no one from the school provided me with my work until the day before I was set to return back to school. They basically just kicked me out of my school, and I didn't really feel like they cared about me at all. Also, my suspension didn't solve the main issue. It left me behind with all the other students. And when I returned from my suspension, my friend had actually told me that my teacher had told my suspension story to the classroom without my permission, and I felt very violated. The suspension honestly caused me a lot of stress and unnecessary trauma. And as I start to think about this upcoming school year, I do feel numb. My community, made of Black and Brown people, have been hit the hardest by this pandemic, in addition to the pain caused by natural uprisings for racial justice. It's very overwhelming that to think with all of this going on, there is still a threat of suspensions hovering over me and all of my peers for any minor infractions. During this time, we need compassion and understanding instead of punishment and threats.
I believe that's done, right?
Yes. So yes, this again was one of our leaders sharing their story on how suspensions have negatively impacted them. And Nico will later talk on about why the solutions, not suspensions, would have helped someone in the situation of this young lady. So I'll kick it off to Nico.
Cool. Thank you, Marcy. Well, I just want to also acknowledge all the like statistics that Marcy shared, and like the numbers, and also the story of our youth. It's a clear example of how suspensions are often something that people don't think about, but it's just another way of further differentiating the equity and what education is supposed to be and supposed to mean for young people. So we know that suspensions unfairly target many students of marginalized communities. So we believe that the solution to so many suspensions and like the school to prison pipeline and other things that may not help youth succeed is passing solutions, not suspensions, because this bill will end the reliance on suspensions as a default way to discipline students and establish a framework to instead use proven restorative approaches to inappropriate behavior and discipline. So like it says here, the basis of the bill is basically to go from punitive measures to more restorative justice approaches. We can go to the next slide. Cool. So one of the first things that this bill would do is it would prohibit suspensions for minor infractions such as tardiness, dress code violations, and insubordination. If we focus on dress codes mostly target LGBT students and students that are or identify as females mostly. So that's a clear target of suspensions. Same thing with insubordination. A lot of insubordination happens with students of color, whether they're too loud, like culturally, or they talk too much. Those are things that like students literally can't change about themselves. And it's a clear way of, again, targeting a certain group of marginalized communities in the school system. So these things could like easily be resolved with a conversation. Yeah, youthful behavior can easily be resolved with a conversation. It doesn't have to go into suspensions and eventually that student missing so many school days. The next thing this bill would do would shorten the maximum days of suspensions from 180 day, which is an entire school year, to only 20 days. So like the youth member said in the video before, they didn't get their work until the day before their suspension ended. So you can imagine like a week-long list of things that she had to get done, having to do it in one day, is kind of insane, and just like makes students either not want to go to school or like back away. I saw a thing in the chat, and that's what we're going to talk about now, which is it would limit the use of suspensions for students from kindergarten to third grade. Yeah, that shit, sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse. That stuff is kind of insane. Kindergartners to third graders are allowed to be suspended. And data shows that students that are suspended from the age of 5 to 8, which is around what kindergarten to third grade is, once they hit the age that they are eligible to drop out of high school, which is around 16, they will most likely drop out. So like suspending students from such a young age, like in the future, will create them to kind of them not wanting to go to school, lose interest in school, feel like they're outsiders, not look at the school system benefiting them but only punishing them. So they're more likely to drop out. The last thing I want to mention with this is that if a student does commit anything that's related to like a federal offense, they will still be subject to a suspension. But again, the whole purpose of this is to move from things that would push students out of school and not wanting to be school and not wanting to further their education into things that would help them learn and feel safe and feel comfortable in their schools. We could go to the next slide. The next thing that this bill would do is that it would encourage practices that promote and sustain a safe, inclusive, respectful school environment through prevention, intervention, discipline. This is super important because we, again, want schools to be a respectful place environment for both the faculty, like teachers and administrators, but also students. I think a lot of times what we see is that school districts may make decisions without the input of students. And sometimes students may feel like a certain teacher is like bothering them, or they don't feel safe going to their teachers. They see their teachers and they think like, oh, this person might not even relate to what I'm doing. So this bill would kind of help promote a way that both teachers and students could feel like they can count on each other, and there's more respect and more communication between both. The next thing this bill would do is it would require school codes of conduct to include restorative approaches to discipline. This is something that has been brought up a lot. Restorative justice is kind of like a new big word that many folks are seeing in many different places. But the basis of restorative justice is literally getting to the root cause of the problem. So it's oftentimes like suspensions, a student gets suspended and they don't even realize that what they've done is caused harm to another person. So restorative justice could either be like a one-on-one conversation instead of kicking them out of school. It could be kind of like, for example, like a bully apologizing to the person that they bullied, but then all parties like understand like what happened or what was going on. So this is definitely a way that everybody who's been affected by such situation could feel like they've gotten justice and feel okay moving on from the situation. And the last thing is that it would require students who are suspended to receive academic instruction and the opportunity to earn credit, complete assignments, and take tests or assessments or exams when they do return to school. Like I mentioned before, some students get suspended and don't even see their work. Some students get suspended and they get all of their work the day before they go into school. So this bill and passing this law in all of New York State would make sure that everybody who unfortunately does get suspended receives their work, their tutors, whatever they got to do on time, so they don't fall behind. And that oftentimes leads to getting left back or missing work or missing time that could have been valuable for that student. And we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so that's basically what solutions not suspensions would do. This is an example of a way that we got creative during COVID to elevate the importance of passing solution not suspensions in New York State. So this is our youth member, Stephen. He's also on this call right now. But Stephen has another youth leader with us that has a troubling suspension story that kind of like traumatized but affected him in different ways. And here he is being illuminated in Union Square in New York City on the side of a Citibank building, just to show like how important students' lives are and how important it is that we get this bill passed. Again, this is the 6th year that we're doing this, and this is a way that we try to literally illuminate the importance of this, but also, talk about Long Island being a part of this. Like it is for all of New York State, and oftentimes we like get told like the city is more progressive in this and that, but there are young people out here on Long Island like fighting for justice and equity in their schools. Stephen is an example of that. And yeah, I'll pass it to Kendra, who will talk a little bit more about all of this.
Thanks, Nico. Super appreciate you highlighting just exactly what the bill does. Again, my name is Kendra, she, her pronouns. And I saw a comment in the chat, right? And just asking curiously, like, will this law, if this solutions not suspensions bill becomes a law, will it affect superintendent hearings? And our hope is yes, right? Our hope is that by having these preventative measures, by having more resources, to more adults who are there to support students' mental and emotional health needs, that we're seeing a reduction in any kind of harsh disciplinary policies, including suspensions, including expulsions, including superintendent hearings, right? We know that this restorative justice approach works in schools because we've already tried it. At the Bushwick campus for social justice, we've started our restorative justice program there a few years ago, and we've seen the number of suspensions be cut down by 50% just as a result of this program. So it's incredible to see the amazing impact it's already having. And that's just in New York, right? And we know that there are states across the country who are using restorative justice practices to help their students, to make sure it's a supportive and safe school environment. And like Nico said, we're not alone in asking for this, right? Again, there's this narrative that Long Island just isn't as progressive, but we're here to tell you, we've talked to the Long Island Latino Teachers Association, the Long Island Black Educators Association, the NAACP State Education Committee, Equity for LI Youth, tons of organizations here on Long Island that are supporting solutions, not suspensions. And we have coalitions across the state who support our fight in solutions, not suspensions. Next slide, please, Erin. And, I know we're running over time, Erin, and we want to get to hear about students' experiences or everyone's experiences here. So I will be brief. I just want to highlight one more story about why this bill is so urgent to pass this legislative session. This student right here is a senior at a school here on Long Island, and he has 3 younger sisters, one in middle school, one in elementary school, and one not school age. She's 4. When this pandemic hit and his mom was working multiple jobs to keep food on the table and pay the rent, they wanted to be safe, so they wanted to be fully remote. So on top of doing his own senior level work in high school, he was making sure that both of his sisters who were in school also were knowing they knew what was going on, and he was helping them with their schoolwork. And then he was making sure that his 4-year-old sister was safe and that she wasn't hurting herself, right? The responsibility of keeping everything together, plus trying to make sure, he helped around the house and maybe took some food out to defrost before his mom came home, was incredibly overwhelming, as you can imagine. And as a teenager trying to get through it all, he got overwhelmed sometimes and stopped going to school for a few days. Instead of a school adult coming and saying, listen, what's going on? We noticed you're not in class, right? What they did is they sent him an email and they said, listen, you've missed too much school. You're suspended for the rest of the school year. That's it, just like that. He was so scared. He was terrified. But because he's one of our youth leaders, he knew how to advocate for himself and he knew how to ask for help. So he came to us and we talked about it, and he reached out to his guidance counselors and he asked for help. Asking for help as a young person is extremely difficult. Asking for help as an adult is extremely difficult, right? But he did it. And not everyone does. Luckily, he was able to return to school, but that's not the case in every student's story. So we know that this happened across New York State throughout the pandemic and before, and we want to make sure it doesn't happen to any more young people. Young people deserve to be in schools. They deserve to have a quality education, and they deserve to have compassion in their schools. We're all human beings, and it is crazy to think that in this day and age, there's no compassion for the complicated lives that we all live. So we are fighting tooth and nail to make sure that this bill passes this legislative session. Next slide, please, Erin. So if you're down to fight for the Solutions Not Suspensions bill, you can fight with us and make an impact. On next Thursday at 4:30, we're gonna get our youth crew on Long Island to make some calls to our elected officials in Albany to make sure that they hear our voice and we share why it's so important for us to pass the Solutions Not Suspensions bill. Nico just dropped in the chat the form. So you want to put your name, email, phone number, and we can make sure you have all the, the Zoom link and follow up with you so you can come through to our phone bank to pressure Albany legislators to pass the Solutions Not Suspensions bill this legislative session. And if you want, feel free to come through and join us. We start our meeting at 5 p.m. Every Thursday, our Long Island young people meet from 5 to 7. And shout out to the ones who were already here who wanted to come check out the Young Long Island Justice Space. Appreciate all of our YPP members here. And then I'll just say one last thing before we jump into conversation. If you would go to the next slide, please, Erin. Is that we know that the majority of, or the students who are suspended from school have a higher rate of being involved in the criminal legal system, right? The school to prison pipeline is so real for so many of our Black, Latinx, and Indigenous students here on Long Island. And one way to fight the school to prison pipeline is to reduce the power, the scope, and the budget of our police departments. This campaign to defund the NYPD is something that Make the Roads Youth Power Project has been fighting for over 10 years, removing police from schools and making sure that the money that the NYPD has gets reinvested in the community and the schools. So next Tuesday, May 25th, next Tuesday, May 25th is a significant date, and it was intentional to have the action here because it is the 1-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. So we will have a March for Justice on that day. We'll gather outside the Barclay Center at 5 p.m. We're gonna have a youth crew coming on the Long Island Railroad, and we're gonna head into Brooklyn, and then we'll come back together, right? Whenever we're together in space in this pandemic, we always make sure we are socially distant. We're wearing masks. We have PPE and hand sanitizer so that everyone is as safe as possible. And then we come home together, right? We don't leave anyone behind, and we make sure we're all together. So if you want to come through to the action, we'll also provide Metro cards and LIRR ticket. So just let us know and we can connect with y'all. So thank you again, everyone, for having us. We appreciate you. And I will pass it to Erin.
Thank you so much. Now that we've stopped sharing, or I stopped sharing my screen, I just want to take a moment before we prompt a little bit of questions that we'll include for those listening on the internet out there. Just how large this issue is, how prevalent this issue is, and how also completely invisible this issue can be for teachers, because they only have you for a year, or for people like myself, white people who are in majority white school districts, because as we all know in this call, Long Island is some of the most racially segregated counties in the country. So the things that I see in Massapequa are not the same things that we're seeing out in Brentwood and East Islip, for example. Like I said, I just want to prompt a few questions, then we'll go into some group discussions. One of the questions that I first thought of was related to superintendents, and is there any type of current actions towards them for continued harsh and unnecessary disciplines towards students? So we all know adults can still be bullies. So when there's a teacher, or when there's a school staff member like a superintendent who's bullying a student, who's directly targeting a student, I understand people like yourself come in and you are their advocates, and it's amazing. That's why Make the Road exists, for one of those reasons. But outside of you, who else are helping these students who are being bullied by staff, and what impact does the staff get if they get in trouble or caught?
Yeah. Are you asking currently or when this bill becomes law?
Thank you. I actually want to know both. So what's currently happening and what can be changed through this bill? How is this bill helping to resolve that type of issue?
Great. So currently, there are actually some districts on Long Island who already have initiated baby steps of restorative justice programs. Brentwood is one of them, but then actually, I believe it's North Babylon, if I'm not wrong, that already has a pretty extensive program where their entire teacher and faculty have been educated in restorative justice practices. I'm not sure if it is North Babylon, but there are multiple schools across Long Island who have already started it. I also mentioned in the Bushwick campus for social justice, they've had this program now for over 5 years. So currently, depending on what school and where your school is in that process, there are some trained adult professionals that are here to mediate and who serve as restorative justice coordinators, who are there specifically to hold space and have preventative measures for young people in the school. In regard to, teachers and superintendents, perhaps being the bullies in the situation, right? That's one of the main proponents of this bill, right? Is changing the culture, right? Nico mentioned it earlier. Is oftentimes we see that, we want to make sure that the teachers are okay and the teachers have the power and the authority, right? But having the power and the authority, right, sometimes makes teachers and administrators unapproachable, right? So then the young person doesn't feel safe, supported, respected in the school. So one thing that we hope that this bill will change is the culture in the school, right? Where the power dynamics shift and the students are able to have honest conversations about the impact that maybe a comment or an action by a teacher or a administrator, what the impact has been on them, right? Just as we, do community agreements in spaces, right? And making sure that the intention and the impact are named when it happens. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
It definitely does. It definitely does. And the reason why I'm kind of prompting this question is because there are many ways than one to impact the school. And what you're saying is kind of an example of that. We have the state assembly, but for example, having restorative justice practices. These are things that are brought up to superintendents and Board of Education members, those who were just elected yesterday, results came out. Prompting these questions to them, like they live in your area. These are people who are in your Facebook groups, they're involved in the PTA, and even those who are currently on this call who are alumni. and you live in those areas, or even if you don't, you just have family who lives there, you still matter. Your opinion still matters. What experiences you had still mattered. And what you talked about is kind of another avenue of how to talk about these things, because we're students every day of our life, and we're also trying to be teachers to each other. So this is an example of like, everyone on this call is learning today. You're becoming a teacher. You can bring these issues to your school. You can email the Board of Education. If you had a good relationship with a teacher at a school, or a good relationship with a guidance counselor, one-on-one relationships is how you really make something happen. And that's what I just wanted to add there. And Deanna, go right ahead with your question, my friend.
Hi, my name is Deanna. Thank you so much for coming. Make the Road is such a powerhouse across New York State in every way, and we also know on Long Island. And so we thank you for the work that you are doing. I had a few questions that I just wanted to touch upon to sort of draw out some points here. So you've said that, or it was noted in the chat, that there's a co-sponsor of this in the Assembly, and I think also in the Senate. Can you please speak more to what are the main political roadblocks to getting this bill passed? Is it like, what is the narrative among a certain constituency in the Senate that doesn't want to put this up on the floor for a vote? Can you just speak to sort of what is the pushback you're getting from inside in Albany as to why this is not going to get passed, or why it hasn't been passed so far?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, and super appreciate you asking. And just to clarify, right, we do have an Assembly sponsor, and I know that the info of that bill is in the chat. And our Senate sponsor, we have secured a Senate sponsor. However, it has not been introduced officially in the Senate. So it's not that there's a specific roadblock necessarily in the Senate. What happened was that when a bill is introduced in Albany, it is officially introduced for that legislative session, which lasts 2 years. So we had to reintroduce our bills this past year. And the prior legislative session, our Senate sponsor had actually retired, Senator Montgomery. So as a result of them retiring, we needed to secure a new Senate sponsor. And kind of issues with the pandemic and certain other bills and campaigns needing to be prioritized, the Senate sponsor that we had originally secured no longer didn't have the capacity to hold the bill. So pretty late in the game, we were struggling to find a new Senate sponsor, but we were able to secure one, which is amazing. And we will, work with this new legislative team to pass it in Albany. And then I will just say that, we've mentioned before that we've been fighting tooth and nail for this bill. And one of the things that we've done as the Youth Power Project here on Long Island is we've had youth here, actually Daniela and Steven, who are both here, helped us lobby Assembly Member Salages, who is the chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus. So she is a powerhouse in her own right, and she has actually said to us that the Solutions Not Suspensions bill is a priority for her and her caucus. So we have actually a ton of support from our legislators. And last week, we did an entire day of lobbying. So we organized multiple lobby visits with legislators across the state. And we now have something like over 45 co-sponsors to the bill. So we actually have a ton of momentum right now, which is really energizing. And we're excited to see how far we can take it this legislative session.
Amen.
Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah. For Kendra, did you meet with any Republicans in the Assembly or Senate discuss with this issue, or?
We actually have not yet, but that's more of just prioritizing some legislators who are a little bit more aligned. If you have any suggestions of Republicans who you think would be in support of the Solutions Not Suspensions bill, Matthew, we would love to connect with you and hear you out.
Okay, because Dave McDonough's my assemblyman. I live in Levittown. I don't
Cool.
think I think he's going to vote no on it if this ever gets passed.
That's why you still got to call. So my assembly member is Republican also.
Mike DeUrso.
Yeah, Michael Durso. His wife is the president of a PTA of an elementary school here also, and she's also a village trustee of Massapequa Park. Their family is very involved in politics. I personally don't really like Michael Durso, but even though you may not think somebody's going to vote on something, calling matters anyway. You putting your voice out there, and you as I'm not sure if you're an alumni or a student.
I am an alumni, ma'am. I mean, there's some parts I agree, but some parts I don't agree on.
Exactly. It's also, we're only talking for about 15-20 minutes here about a lengthy bill. So to those who want to put the time in, feel free to read it. I also want to put this moment out there. If we could stop recording and stop being all of our live streams. I want to give people